Before we get right into the podcast episode, this was filmed summer of last year of 2024. There are a couple of episodes that I still want to put out before I end up having new episodes out there for you guys, but these past 6 to 8 months have been crazy, and I need to update you guys on everything once I film my latest podcast episode, which will be in the next 2 episodes after this one. But anyways, I just wanted to put these episodes out since there's still a piece of content and I don't want to waste that. But anyways, I missed you guys so much. I hope you guys enjoy this episode, and we are so back. Hi everybody, welcome back to another podcast episode of She Speaks Her Mind, your go-to comfort person, your host, Anna Pedron. Welcome. So I'm very excited for today's podcast episode. With this topic, I find these podcast episodes get a little bit more tension than my other episodes just because I know a lot of people can relate to the same things that I can, especially when it comes to living in a toxic household or just dealing with childhood trauma and generational trauma, anything within that nature. This is why I technically started my podcast in the first place, was because I wanted to share my personal stories, release my emotions, learn how to navigate them, and inspire people like you that kind of feel lost and kind of need that advice from someone who has gone through this, that has dealt with these types of difficult situations. I have some podcast episodes like this already up on my podcast through Spotify, YouTube, and Apple Podcasts. So if you haven't taken a look at them already, I highly recommend that you do, because those are the ones that I was really vulnerable about. Even though I'm going to be vulnerable with this one, those are kind of like the starting points of, my personal stories that you guys can probably relate on and then kind of grasp with the idea with where I've been in my life. And I also want to put a disclaimer out before we start this podcast episode, because even though that I'm going to talk about a lot of my childhood trauma and, my personal stories that I do on my podcast episodes, if you haven't already listened to, I don't want you guys to think that I do it for attention or that I want sympathy for it, because I do know when I put podcast episodes like this, I know I'm at least helping one person out there, and that's all that really matters to me, is that I'm making a difference in someone else's life, and that's all that matters. Also, another disclaimer before I start, I'm not here wanting to trash talk my parents in any way or just like trash talk about my family, but this is just like the past of what I've gone through at this stage of my life. Me and my parents' relationship has significantly changed, where I adore my parents so much that I want to do everything with them now. I literally FaceTime my parents every single day just to be like, what are you doing? I want to know the tea. What's been going on with you? I think it's just as you get older, your perspective changes. It depends on how you all choose to move forward with it too. And the way your relationship with your parents could be so different with mine, where you absolutely do not want to reconnect with them. And that's okay, because everyone's relationship with their parents, their family is different. How you choose to move forward with it is your take and what's going to make you happy. Let's get into it now. So if I were to look back 4, 5, 6 years ago while I was still living at home, I had no idea how much it took a toll on my mental health with how I felt as a teenager, because the only thought that I could have to myself was, is this how I'm supposed to live? Is this what normalcy is in a family? I had so many questions. Anytime I wanted to be the best daughter for my parents, they would just always be left disappointed. There was actually one time where I did this thing for my parents where I cooked them a whole ass breakfast. I left it on the table, and I also wrote like an apology letter telling them how sorry I was for like the things that I've done. Guess what? A few hours later, we were literally back to square one because we were fighting all over again. And that's the thing, when you live in a toxic household, it feels like you're talking to a wall. Do not get me wrong though, because I was not a perfect daughter. Okay, I would slam doors in their face. I would even like push my parents in a way where I'm like, don't talk to me like that. And I would get them away from me, where I would push their shoulder off. And just thinking about it, I wish I could take all of this back, because it's hard to say these things now, because as they're getting older, it just makes me think how rude and selfish I was to put my parents in a state like that. The hardest part was that even when you knew that you were telling the truth to your parents, whatever it could be, you were still getting blamed. You were still getting in trouble for being truthful. When you have strict parents, you're gonna have kids that will rebel. And I was one of those kids that were rebellious. I could only imagine if I had kids right now and they weren't being truthful to me, that would hurt more than them actually telling the truth. Because why would I want to hear my kids lie about something when they could have just told me the truth in the first place? As I've gotten older, being where I am now that I have moved out, everything is so much more different than what it used to be. I truly do believe though that when you change your whole environment, whether that is just, maybe switching up your room or you're actually able to move out, that's the most ideal way, is for you to move out to carry a different relationship with your parents and you're able to set boundaries. Your relationship with your parents can change so much. But I know in a lot of different circumstances, like I said earlier, that may not be the case where you want to rekindle that relationship with your parents again or have a relationship with your parents, even though that you guys could be blood related and, they are, in quotations, family. A lot of the times there would be situations that you would have to cut them out in order for you to just gracefully live your life and be happy. I know what it's like when you've done everything that you can to make them happy and nothing changes and you feel like you've tried your best. I know it gets lonely, and the worst part is that you tend to blame this all on yourself for things that you couldn't even control. I think no matter how much I talk about my childhood trauma, the toxicity that I would deal with through my parents, I think I'm just always going to feel some sort of pain, even though that I have healed from it and moved on. There's always going to be a place in your heart where, it stings. When there's no escape to your situation and you feel like giving up and you're just wanting to run away, honestly, I get that. I was right where you were. You know how many times I have tried to run away and got caught? It's been way too many. There was a time where I was so fed up, and it's not that typical where a teenager wants to run away from home because their parents wants to ground you or something, but you were just mentally and physically exhausted. That's how fed up I was. I was more mentally exhausted than anything, but there was a time where I packed up a suitcase, put everything that I needed to in there, called a cab, and as soon as the cab came to pick me up, I told them, can you park like a few houses away so that my parents don't see you? And this cab was so stupid that they parked like on the side of the driveway as soon as my parents got there. And of course my parents were so suspicious because they were questioning like, why is there a cab right outside of the house? And so for some reason my dad was smart enough to go into my room and he's like, what's going on here? Looks into my closet and he finds the suitcase that I was trying to hide because I'm like, oh shit, I can't leave now. Like this was supposed to be my time where I was supposed to move out and run away. But that wasn't the case. He found the suitcase, he opened it up, threw out all my clothes just sporadically in my room. And, I was crying. He hit me with a hanger. He gave me, is this a little too much? I mean, like, it's traumatic. I don't also want to trigger you guys, but this is the truth. This is what has happened to me. Yes, I was physically abused, but it's not as traumatic as all the mental abuse that I was thrown with. But anyways, that was kind of a story to tell because I never really expose these things unless it's going to be through my podcast. So like anything that you want to hear with my personal life stories, it's going to be through my podcast episodes. And I think that's where I feel most safe, is where I share these experiences through my podcast. And I'm so glad that you guys are the ones that are listening to this, because who are you going to share this with? No one. Like, this is our personal shared diary together. And, I just want to make it more safe where eventually I want to have like a little community group chat type of thing where we can all cry together. Just kidding, not cry, but like, connect and support each other with whatever we're going through. And if you guys want me to make that soon, I don't know where, Patreon, like what are these platforms called where I can do all of these things? But if you guys want me to do something like that, or maybe like, that new Instagram feature that they put out with subscribing to me or something, and I can put out my live updates on there, or I don't know. Please tell me, what do other podcasters, influencers do to, connect with their followers on like another deep level? Anyways, honestly, at one point I did think that my parents were narcissists, and maybe they were, even though that they did have a lot of traits that fell under that category. Maybe it just took me a long time to realize that it may have came from tough love. And the only way they only really been taught was how they were loved from their parents. That's not to say that's a good thing, because one day when I become a mom, a parent, I want to end the generational curse. And I feel like right now I am ending that through my family and like through all the future kids that are yet to come in this world, and teaching you guys, teaching the future kids that we are going to be the ones that will end the generational trauma. But then also at the end of the day, I do realize, you know, my parents are humans. They are right now just experiencing life. And so I have to take that into account and realize maybe they've never grown up to be who they wanted to be, and heal their inner child. And I don't know if you guys were like me in the past, or maybe you guys are right now and you guys are like really young, but you don't know how to deal with your emotions, because I was a very angry, selfish, resentful, envious teen growing up. And I think honestly, it was just because I was restricted to doing so many of the things that I wanted to do. And who knows if that was FOMO or what, but I just couldn't simply live my life to the fullest and do what every kid wanted to do. I would have to sneak out. My parents would think that I would be doing like the most craziest thing ever by doing drugs. And I'm like, guys, I'm only like 14 or 15 here. Even though my friends were doing all of those at the time, I really never got myself into doing that, unless it was like smoking weed, which I won't lie, because I did smoke a lot of weed when I was younger, and you know, maybe it was not legal at the time, but I'm kind of glad that I did that all when I was really young, because now that I'm like in my mid-20s, I do not care. I do not give a single F about drinking, partying, going out on the weekends, and doing what everybody does, because I'm literally over that phase. I'm not a pick me person, but I'm just saying, like, I am over that phase, and maybe it was good for me to do all the things that made me rebellious and made me get hated on from my parents and my family, because I had to do all these things in order for me to grow up and learn from my, in quotations, mistakes. But the hardest thing, like growing up, was to just be loved, because never in my life, or still to this day, do we ever consistently say I love you to each other, because no. I feel like being just an immigrant family, those are the last words that you will ever hear from someone. The first time that I ever heard someone say I love you was my boyfriend's family. They kept saying I love you to each other, and I thought it was the weirdest thing ever. And I was like, this must be like what white people do. I feel like a lot of white families say I love you to each other, and they actually mean it. They genuinely mean it. But then when I heard it from them, it just weirded me out, because they started saying I love you to me for a split second. When I first heard those words, I'm like, who are you saying that to? I don't feel that love, because I don't know what love really is, and like how to be cared for in that way, because I never got that from my parents. But as the months kept going by, the years kept going by, dating my boyfriend, I've felt this love that I've never felt before romantically. Do not ever give up. Don't ever feel like that you won't ever feel loved, because you can always get that love from someone else, even if it's not from your family. But now what I realized is that the type of love that my family shows me and my brother and like our whole family is that they show us love by cooking us food or just like being around them. Now with growing up, I appreciate that so much. I take in all that I can to just appreciate these moments, because one day I won't ever have these moments again where my parents will be able to cook for me, and I'm gonna have to do it myself. And so I guess in that way, I'm gonna be able to show my kids two types of love, where I can say I love you and also show my love by cooking them food as well, because I do love cooking, and I probably got that from my dad and my grandpa. So one other thing that I have learned about living in a toxic household, and something that you guys can learn from too, is that no matter how many times you are actually right, you're never going to be right in their minds. And there's just really no time to get them to understand, because it's not worth it. It's not worth the time and effort. So if you are going through this right now, where you're dealing with toxic family members or your parents that are toxic, just remember that just because they are family, that doesn't mean you have to tolerate their lies, their manipulation, their drama, their gossip, and the disrespect. And I know it's really hard right now if you're living at home, but trust me, once you're able to find a way out and get yourself out of the chaos, all of this stress is going to go away. And sure, when you move out, you still might pick up those really bad habits that you've learned from your parents. But if you want to break those bad habits, you have to tell yourself that this isn't how you choose to show up for yourself, and you don't have to put up with what you used to deal with anymore. If you haven't listened to my other podcast episodes yet, and this is your first episode that you just started listening to me, I'll kind of give you guys a debrief about my childhood trauma history and just like my family history of what I've gone through. But everyone in my family used to shame on me for anything that I did and used to always put the blame on me for being a bad daughter and just being a bad person, which made me believe that all of it was true. And this debrief is literally so short because there was so much more to it by being mentally and physically abused. But the effort that they put into this every single day by me being consistently manipulated, gaslighted, it drains your mental energy. So when I used to deal with all of this, I would ask myself questions like, why am I so hard to love? And let's be real for a second. I was so young at this time, okay? I did not know anything that was really good or bad, and I was still trying to figure out life. Why at that age was I having to deal with all of this stuff when the only thing that I should be worried about is living life? But they were also worried about me trying to get my shit together, even though that I was only 14, 15, or 16 years old. What do you expect from someone that young to get their shit together already? So when the day finally came when I decided to finally tell my parents that I'm moving out, I'm leaving this house for good, I was so hesitant because I know it wasn't going to be the reaction that they wanted. And by the time I told them a few weeks before that I was going to move, their reaction to me was them laughing in my face because they didn't think that it would actually happen until the day came and they're like, why are you doing this? Why are you moving out? You should save up, blah, blah, blah. And then it made me think, it made me spiral because like, am I doing this for me or disappointing my parents? What am I doing? Let me tell you, it was not an easy decision. For a lot of people, it could be a really easy decision for them to make and move out. Simple as that. But my head was spiraling. I was thinking too many things that I shouldn't have been. I would say like, maybe now is not the right time. I can wait it out a few more years. I don't want to leave my parents because they need me. And with that being said, I was very codependent at the time. And that's why I always needed them to do everything for me or do things with me, even though that we had a toxic relationship. I was very codependent. But in order for me to grow and flourish, to become, the woman I want to be and just become independent, this is the only way where I can set boundaries, do these things for myself to become happy if I move out now. And there were a lot of messages that I have came across with you guys saying that you're so eager to move out, that you don't want to disappoint your parents. But this is what I have to say to you guys because I had to learn the hard way as well. You are not responsible for your parents' emotions. You are not responsible for your parents' reactions to your boundaries. You are not responsible for making your parents to understand why you are choosing a different life because you are responsible to your life in a way that shows self-respect. Don't ever think that you are disappointing your parents because all of us who grew up in a toxic household choose to grow up in different directions, and it's not our fault that our parents are not prepared to continue to grow with us. So trying to get them to understand with anything that you want to do, where you want to go in life, your aspirations, your job, that is not your job anymore. Now that I'm a grown-ass adult and I'm not 12, 13, 14, 15 years old, that's what it may seem like to them in their eyes forever. I think it's just time for them to grow up as well because you have to value your time, your energy, value your space, and just value you. To kind of sum this all up, if you are dealing with this right now and you're wanting to move out, your time will come. I promise you that. And even though maybe you are really young right now, or you may not have the funds for it, save up as much as you can. Try and work as much as you can. Keep yourself busy. Maybe do some side hobbies that keeps your mind off of the chaos, and just try to do things that will keep you sane, because I would always journal whenever I felt angry. And another thing, when I used to live at home and get myself away from the toxicity, was by working out. The gym was my only way, my only exit for me to have that some sort of free therapy, where the gym was my home. So if you can find something that makes you feel alive, or even just like going out for walks or like spending more time outside, that is just like a really good way to cure your soul and your happiness, even through all the stress and toxic situations that you're going through. I hope you guys enjoyed this podcast episode, but I hope I covered up some things that you guys might have wanted to hear. But if there were some things that I may have not talked about, let me know in the show notes on Spotify. Let me know your guys' thoughts on this with this podcast episode in the comments on YouTube, and just show some love. Give me a 5-star rating on Spotify, because that will absolutely help the show with more people to watch or listen. And I feel like there's so many people out there that are going through so much trauma in their life, dealing with toxic families or toxic parents, or dealing with toxic family members, and they just need something like this to listen to, or just getting their shit together, because I talk a lot about that too. I love you guys so much, and I will see you guys next week.